Hello, hello, and welcome back. Yes, I've been out for a while, I know, but we just had the US Nationals, and there were two games that made me want to make a video, and of course, here we are. Last round, fighting for the first place on the 12th grade section and the second grade section, we have a game with the Kings Indian defense, and we have another game with the Pierce defense, and more specifically, with this very aggressive variation. So of course I wanted to go over with you. The main one that I want to review is this one from the second grade championship. Imagine these 7 8 year olds fighting for this first place, and to my surprise I was covering the event, and I get to see my favorite opening in place and played almost perfectly. So let's get to it. First game that I want to review, again, K2 fighting for the first place on the last round, and we get to see e4 d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3. And those of you who play the Pierce defense, you know that at this point we're looking forward to our opponent's decision. Are they going to play the classical, very quiet, like classical music? Are they going to play the Austrian? Or of course we could also see the 150 attack, very aggressive. And we have said here on YouTube on the chessable course counterblow that we are going to play pawn to c6. We expect our opponent to simply play queen to d2, trying to get to h6, castle to the opposite side, and attack us heavily. So pawn to c6, I like to play it before anything else, and the key is to delay castling. If I don't castle kingside, then this plan is not going to be as effective. So after queen to d2, black plays knight b to d7, castle right away, and of course pawn to b5. Opposite side castling. Well, we're not castled yet, but with that white king castle to the queen side, it is important to start putting pressure on that side of the board. Pawn to f3. White is trying to begin their expansion. They have a leverage pawn on f3, and now they could play g4, h4, and so on. So after pawn to f3, we got knight to b6, and we see movement on the queen side. We're delaying everything on the king side. Again, we're ready to play knight to c4. Now, to my surprise, the white pieces here played pawn to d5. Interesting move. I think white is basically trying to undermine the defender of the b5 pawn. If, for example, we can see bishop takes b5 with check, and then they pick up on d5. So what did the black pieces do? Well, feel free to pause the video, take a moment, pretend like you're playing against these intimidating second graders, and the white pieces just play d5. How would you respond? Well, if you thought of the move pawn to b4, congrats, this is what was played, and it makes a lot of sense. The white pieces don't have time to collect on c6 because I'm hitting the knight, and at the end of the day, we're supposed to be expanding, attacking on the queen side. That's where the king is. So after b4, knight to b1, pawn to c5, we can see how this pawn chain is giving us so much space on the queen side, not to mention so much control over the dark squares in the center. Any of you who already went over the Pierce defense with me, we have talked about this dark square strategy. Our very first move is pawn to d6. That means we control that dark square in the center. So after pawn to c5, we got bishop b5 by white, and of course we block the check, and now the white pieces continue with queen e2. Now after queen e2, we can see how the battery is already deactivated. I don't think white is ready to attack us on the king side. And for that reason, the black pieces played bishop g7. So this is not coming. And of course, at the end of the day, this bishop is just on a beautiful diagonal. Not to mention that, again, along with these pawns, we basically own the dark squares. Very nice chess so far. Then pawn to h4. I gotta admit, I reviewed this game with one of my students this week, and I was telling him how sometimes I ignore this h4. It's not a big deal, especially if I have a good attack going on the other side. But truth is, you cannot go wrong with pawn to h5. That's it. Put a stop to it. That pawn is going to go nowhere. And then after knight to d2, the black pieces simply asked, hey, what are you going to do? Are you going to stay there for me to take you, or are you going to finally trade? Now, after the trade, my instinct is to improve my queen, castle, and have a good game. The black pieces here, Winston actually played a very logical move, knight f to d7. Number one, we are bringing pieces from the king side to the queen side. That's what we need to be attacking. Number two, we open up the bishop to put pressure on this diagonal on the queen side where the king is. And of course, once more, we've talked so much about the dark square strategy. We want to be occupying those dark squares in the center. So knight f to d7 makes a lot of sense. Then we got king to b1. And then again, feel free to pause the video and think about how you'd continue as the black pieces. Now, needless to say, we need to continue to be aggressive. We need to continue to attack. So if you thought of moves like pawn to a5, definitely it is consistent with our plan. But Winston came up with a very nice move here, knight to a4. We're basically taking advantage of the bishop, the knight, and we're putting pressure on b2. If they advanced, of course, we got a beautiful fork on c3. So what did they play? Well, we have knight to c4, and then one more time, what would you play here as the black pieces? If you immediately considered the tactic that Winston found in this position, congrats to you, because the beautiful move bishop b2 was played. Give me the pawn. That's the one piece preventing me from playing knight to c3. And of course, if knight b2, well, knight to c3 is just completely winning. After bishop b2 in the game, we have queen to d3. Of course, we don't want to do the fork now because we drop the bishop and the knight for the rook. We know two minor pieces are better than the rook. So instead, after queen d3, we have knight to e5. Remember the knight that came to d7, then to e5, hitting that queen. Then knight takes, bishop takes, and we are ready again to play knight to c3 and collect the rook. Instead, we got rook f1, check, and then instead of taking the pawn, we have queen a5, just bringing everyone to the queen side. We've talked about this many times before, but if you split the board in half, you can see already how we have 1, 2, 3 pieces basically attacking on the queen side, and they only have the queen right now helping on the queen side. So after queen a5, we got pawn to f4, and knight a2 is check, knight c3 is check, and then bishop to g7. Simple. After knight to e2, my reaction would be, you know what, I'm winning already by 2 pawns. This is very easy to just push, so I'll be simplifying the game. The black pieces here just played knight to b5, very energetic, basically trying to keep the pieces on the board. Winston is laser focused on attacking that king and checkmating it. So after knight b5, we got queen b3, activate the pieces so the rook is ready to advance, queen to c4. We know the queen is not that good of a piece to block pawns because it is very easy to attack and make it go away. So after knight c4, queen to b3, pawn to c4, and the black pieces simply resigned. Now, I think it's a short but very instructive game, and at the very least, is a good way to reinforce what we have already learned about the Pirc defense, and more specifically, this opposite side castling attack. Now, one thing that I like to do and that I would like you to do is basically set up this position against the engine. We have talked about this so many times. You know how to do it. Set it up against the engine and see if you can convert from this position. You'll be surprised. It is not that easy. So this is how the first place in K2 was decided. And by the way, I wanted to take a moment. I promised a friend of mine, author and chess player, Vishnu, he has a new book out to help children not only, well, to help children get into this fascinating world of chess. It's a very fun and beautiful book. Again, he just told me he had it out. I told him, hey, next time I make a video, I'll be happy to share it with our community, with our friends. All the information is in the description. If you're interested, if you have kids or you know someone who might be interested, well, just check out the information. You can see where you can find it, what the book is about, and just take a look, okay? With that said, like always, let me know in the comments if you have any questions, anything that didn't make sense, and I hope to see you soon.